Welcome to Grandad Reviews. In this video I want to look at metering, not just Fuji cameras, because this relate to all cameras that are out there. And the reason I wanted to look at this is I see on quite a few Facebook groups to do with photography that beginners are coming in and asking the question, how should I meter, or what's the best metering settings my camera? And to be honest, you can't answer that because you don't know what scene they're going to be taking. Every situation is going to be different. And what I thought we'd first look at is how the metering works and what the camera is actually doing. So we've got this scene here that we're going to photograph, and what you've got to realise is what your eyes see isn't what the camera sees. What I'm seeing is a nice light blue sky, a well lit canal, and then these shadows over here, which you can probably see on this video, are very dark. They're actually quite light, and I can see all the detail in them and all the detail in the clouds in the sky. And that's because our eyes have a huge amount of dynamic range. If you Google it, it'll tell you whatever that figure is. So our eyes can actually see detail in the shadows, detail in the sky, even if there's a big difference between them. Now our camera can't. Now we've got my Fuji X-T3 set up here. I'm going to record the screen so we can see what's going on. And most cameras will be able to set what kind of metering mode you can use. In Fuji we've got a matrix, center weighted, spot and average. So the sensor in the camera only has a very narrow dynamic range. If you look up your camera, it will probably tell you 10 stops or 14 stops. All that's meaning basically is that the difference between the shadows and the highlights can be, let's say, 10 stops. Anything beyond that, the highlights will be blown out and too bright. But you've got to basically learn your camera to see how it reacts to that dynamic range. And what we'll show here is how the camera meters in the basic matrix metering mode. And what that matrix metering is doing, it's looking at the scene, so it's breaking the scene down into zones basically, and it's going to prioritise those zones to calculate the exposure. Now its first main zone, the zone that it's going to put most priority into, is going to be where it thinks your main subject is going to be, and that can be in the centre of the frame. So it's going to use that as its main point of reference, and then it's going to break the zones down into what it thinks is the sky, so the elements at the top of the sensor, and what it thinks is going to be the shadow, which is the elements at the bottom of the sensor. So in our case, this scene here, what I'm focused on is bush in the centre, so it's going to say, right, that is what is the main subject that I want to be in, properly exposed. Then it's going to look at that sky, and then it's going to look at all these shadows down here, and it's going to say, right, okay, the sky's really bright, so I've got to adjust my exposure for that. The shadows are quite dark, so I've got to adjust my exposure for that. But it's not going to be able to get all of that in. It knows that. So it's going to make the choice for you of what's going to be blown out or not. If we look at the screen, obviously I'll show you this on the recording monitor. We look at the histogram, see this, just there, the shadows right over to the left, and that highlight right crushed up against the right, so we know that's blown out. It's not going to capture anything there, and the shadows are not going to capture much either. So the camera's going to have to make a decision on what it's going to do, and it's decided. I've got it in aperture priority, so it's set the shutter speed. I've got the ISO set at 200, aperture set at 5.6, and so it's set 160th. So we can take that shot, and we've got the image taken. Now if you want to see what's going to be blown out a bit better, if you've got your swipes on the screen set to bring the RGB histograms up, it'll actually bring the blinkers up, and it will show you that the sky is blown out. And you can actually do this after the fact. So if you play the image and then bring your RGB histograms up, you can still see that image was blown out in the sky. and that's the decision the camera's made for you. You as the photographer, sorry to decide, knowing the limitations of the camera, do I want the sky to be blown out and crush the shadows, because that's the only way I'm going to do that, or do I want the shadows, details in the shadows to be brought up, and I'll blow the sky out. So let's say we want the sky to be correctly exposed. We have a number of ways of doing this. As I say, I'm in aperture priority, so to get that sky to be not blown out, basically, I can either look at the histogram or the actual screen, and I can use exposure compensation. So I can bring exposure compensation into the minuses, and if you look, you'll see that on the histogram, that sky comes away from the side of the right hand side of the histogram, and we can see on the screen, which don't always trust, that the sky is now not blown out. If we bring the RGB on, but we'll see it on the recording screen, bring the RGBs up, you'll see that I've only got a little bit that's blinking, and I can bring that out as well. But you can now see that the shadows are completely crushed, but that bush is still reasonably there, so we might be able to bring that back and the shadows back in post. We're 1 1/3 stops under, so yeah, I should think so. So we can take that photo. Now the other way we could have done that on the Fuji, we could go into manual, and I could have changed the shutter speed myself. So if I change this to manual, I can then lower that shutter speed until I've got the same effect, like so. And that's one other way of doing it. Staying on matrix for the time being. And now we want the shadows. So what we could do, bring those shadows away from, see how it's pushed up against the left of the histogram, bring that away from the histogram. You could also look at the screen, and now we can see the shadows are in, but obviously the sky, as you can see with the blinkers, is completely blown out. Just one, I reckon they're about there. What we're basically saying is, yes, the camera will make good decisions for you in matrix meeting if you're on auto and you don't adjust anything, but it's your decision at the end of the day. Is that correct? That'll be just the camera's interpretation of the scene. You've got to look at the scene and decide what you want to be the main subject, and then what you want to include in that. Do you want the blue sky? Do you want all the shadows crushed so you're not worried about what's in the shadows? Or do you want the detail in the shadows but you're not too worried about losing the sky? You want both. If you haven't got the dynamic range in the camera to get both, you're not going to do it. You're going to have to make a compromise on that. There is ways of doing it, and if we do decide that yes, I want the sky to be nearly blown out but not completely, we can bring that just off the right hand side of the histogram, and this is called exposing to the right. And if we're looking at the actual meter, we're only 2/3 of a stop down, so we should in theory be okay. We should be able to bring the details in the shadows, but you will bring noise into it. Now if we just wanted shadows on a different scene, well, we've got a different scene here. Now I've got this scene here, and my point of interest is the trees over here on the left, on the other side of the canal. And what we've got here, the sky is now correctly exposed, but the shadows are a lot deeper. But we're not anywhere near the right hand side of the histogram. So if we start exposing until we're just touching that, or only a little bit of blinkage going on, we can gain some more, we can bring that detail in the shadow, and we've not lost the sky. So in most circumstances, exposing to the right of the histogram gives you the most latitude, because you've not blown the sky out, so we know when we're in post we can bring that back with a highlight slider in Lightroom or whatever software you use, and we can bring the shadows as well. Whereas if we leave it at what it should be, yes, the sky's going to be great, but these shadows, you might not be able to bring them back without adding too much noise. If we just wanted the shadows, moving the camera here, You're now saying, yep, I want the shadows, your sky's blown out, you're not worried about it. You might want, that's fine. You can bring that just off, a little bit blown out, not too much. Maybe go down a bit more, and you've got some nice deep shadows which you can play around with in Lightroom. So the thing to do is to get used to what your metering system and how it works in your camera, but don't let it dictate what you should actually be setting your exposure. You've got to decide what's the most important thing for you. You've got to decide what's important to you. In this case, it's that tree over there. That's important to me. So fine, make sure that that is what's exposed correctly. And if you're using matrix metering, you know that whatever you're focused on is what's the main point. If you want to confirm that, then what we can do is we can change this to spot metering. So wherever, if you've got it set that the spot metering moves with the focus point, then that is the correct exposure for that spot. Matrix metering is going to make sure that's as close as possible to the correct exposure, and then give some emphasis to the surroundings to get as close as possible. Well, that's my quick look at setting your metering. As I say, every situation is going to be different. There is no correct way. You can let the camera decide if you want and let it do its metering thing. 90% of the time you'll find it's yes, spot on, excellent. But if you remember, what you're seeing with your eyes isn't what the camera's seeing. So if you decide that you want something different, you're going to have to take control. And then you're going to have to decide what's the most important part. Is it sky, shadows, or are you trying to get some combination of it? If it's neither will it seem, like say what we're looking at now, then yeah, you'll be fine whatever the camera says. If you've got varying shadow and highlights, then you're going to have to decide what you want to lose, or do you want to make the compromise in the sky or the shadows. Now obviously there is other ways of doing it. You can do what we call HDR, where you take a shot with the sky exposed correctly, shot with the mids correctly, and the shot with the shadows correctly exposed, and then combine them. Yes, you can do that. That is a possibility, but then that's another video, I think. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, now subscribe. Till next time, see you later.